Hello, everybody, and welcome to the RE Screening Podcast. I am your host, REScreening.com's own Mark Eastman, and with me, as always, is co-host extraordinaire Shane Leonard.
Hello.
And this week it's Dune,
Yeah.
and we are taking a break from doing our lists.
You hate the lists.
Yeah,
You
because
found
I
a
just
way.
decided that I don't want.
You found a way to
what happened.
sabotage the lists.
No, really, because we're now doing this on video.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like a great idea at the time
To do the lists or
to
to do video?
start doing this with lists.
Oh, yeah,
To like
yeah.
start
No.
doing the video and go,
Yeah.
here's the list. And mainly, I think, because as we mentioned during the show, kind of, you get a list, and I think especially our list, and not necessarily everybody's list,
Yeah.
because most people's lists are horrible and all the same as everybody else's, and ours are at least different.
A little bit.
But as we mentioned, I do hate lists, but I think lists are a good way to know critics, right? If you are just reading a critic and you just jump in on a review, you go, well, I mean, I agree with them on that review.
Yeah.
But now, what do you I mean, you've got to read a bunch to know if,
Right.
anybody could get one right.
Right.
So you have to read like a bunch.
Yeah.
So I thought it made sense to start with our best of the year, and then people can go, these guys are idiots,
Right.
or
I hate
or
him or I
whatever.
like him or
But like right away.
Excuse me.
But then also I thought, now that we did that, that really actually just kind of doing a show, doing a podcast episode,
Right.
that's what we really do, should be out there in the video.
You didn't like my idea to just drop a podcast for movies and just do lists
and just
every
do a
week.
list
Just do
every
a new
week.
list every week.
We get like a random word generator
Yeah.
and go
Best BLT condiments, and you're
Right.
like, oh God.
right. Yeah, best movie featuring a sandwich.
Yeah,
or,
right.
Whatever.
Actually,
No.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so we're doing Dune this week. And before we jump right into that,
Yeah.
like really quickly, I just want to talk, and I mean really quickly, about a couple of shows. But also I do want to mention we are going to move towards the show being quarterly. So
Yeah.
for those
Well,
of you who are longtime listeners or whatever, and actually totally get, you can watch me start a timer here.
that's okay. And this is I'll not to just fill in too. Last week's episode, though, the first video episode we've done in a long time, that was an anomaly. We have had a couple shows where we've gone like 80 minutes.
Right.
I mean, I think there's been even a 90-minute thing, but that was absolutely a rarity.
That was insane.
What a way to kick it off. I mean, we both got done, looked at each other and looked at the watch and looked at the clocks and was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
So that's anyway, we usually are an hour for the show.
Right.
But
And so what we're gonna do now is try and keep it to 45 minutes.
Okay. We'll do
For
that.
for reasons of picking a random time.
Sure.
Frankly.
That's
Just because I think with doing it on video, it just makes like a little bit more sense. But also this is available, through YouTube, like a YouTube podcast, right? Where
Yeah.
you can have just the audio, which
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
yeah. So anyway, just to get those things out of the way, we're gonna make things a little bit shorter, and we wanted to have just straight a review. And this week we're doing Dune, and it's huge and crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Mostly, I've seen people love it. It's interesting the responses, and like I said, I'm going to talk about a couple of TV shows, but it is interesting to see the responses because people love it. Really want to bag on it in weird ways, or like totally don't understand what's going on at all.
Yeah.
And mostly, as people on YouTube anyway will have seen, there are like several at this point, like right-wing people, like really talking it up. And it's so bizarre.
I wonder if because there's a context and a subcontext, and I appreciate a lot of it with Dune. And just before we get into it anyway, like it has that Friday Night Lights feel to me, which some listeners will know Friday Night Lights was very popular, and then eventually a bunch of movies and TV shows used the formula. And by the time the movie came out and the show came out, you're like, I've seen this done a million times.
Right. Because
Dune as a book, in the 70s, I don't know how original or unoriginal it was. I wasn't, I didn't read it when it came out. I was too young, but
right.
I do understand that it's, especially watching it and knowing the story later, man, people cribbed from it a lot.
Right.
Tell other stories from Star Wars to all other, it doesn't have to be fantasy and sci-fi stuff, so that you're watching it again now and you're like, man, this was like sort of an originator of things.
Right.
But there is certainly a political undertone of things that are happening in there. And it's sort of funny. This is the time of year when politics is getting wonky anyway. So maybe it's just flies to the honey. I don't know. It makes sense that
Yeah,
there would be
I don't know.
some.
The responses are very strange. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's what we're doing. But before we jump into the movie, I just want to
TV.
throw out really quick a couple of shows that are on.
Yeah.
First one is Shogun on FX. Is bonkers good.
I had a friend text me the
It's
other day and said,
it's
why aren't you watching this yet?
insanely good.
Yeah, I got to check
It
this
is
out.
so cool.
All right.
If it's a show like if there's the slightest chance you will like it.
Yeah.
If you I mean, it's one of the most famous
Sure.
limited series
Oh
things that
God.
ever happened before, right?
Right.
I mean, it was massive and huge,
Yeah.
and hopefully everyone knows what it is or has some exposure to it or whatever. It's
Yeah.
not like a new thing. But if you don't even know anything about it and you like watch the trailers and promo spots for
Right.
it or whatever, and there is any chance in hell at all
Yeah.
that you will like it,
I'm up for it.
you will love it.
Oh, that's great.
It is insanely good, and everyone in it is just it's like madness.
All right.
It's
I gotta look real quick. Because I don't know who deeply is in
it's
it.
it's like watching a movie when you go to a movie and you go, "What the hell? Like,
Yeah.
why are all movies not like this?"
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
That's great.
It's so good, and it's just uh, so well put together, and it the weirdest thing was after I was watching it for a little bit, I was like, "This is FX? Like, how is this not
Right.
like
Right.
HBO
Oh
or,
yeah.
whatever, like something that's, can do like a big crazy thing." You're like, "This is on FX?"
Wow.
Like, I don't know, but it's awesome. And then the other one is something potentially flying way further under the radar, which is the completely made up adventures of Dick Turpin,
Oh,
which is on Apple.
you're going real yin
And
yang today.
yeah, and it's Noel Fielding, who is basically British TV comedy kind of icon at this
Right.
point. Also on British Baking or whatever the last couple seasons
That's great.
for whatever reason.
That's great.
Um, but he is if you don't know who Noel Fielding is anyway, right? He's like Mighty Boosh, and he was on
Right.
like
That's
had
right.
a guest role on the IT Crowd that people might know him from. But he's just if you swim in the right circles, I mean,
Right. He's a familiar
he's
face.
everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You would know who he is. He's a hilarious comedian guy that's been around the block,
Yeah.
right? Like the Mighty Boosh was forever ago.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, but he's and it's this it's the show is about his adventures of like being like the world's goofiest highwayman, right? It's like, a period thing. It's like whatever. It's back in the day of highwaymen,
Right.
right?
So anyway.
And stand and deliver and holding up coaches and
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
And it's completely goofball, right? It's a really screwbally kind of, almost Blackadder kind of
Yeah.
world if you're familiar with British TV at all. And it is really good.
Oh
It,
man.
it
What's it on? It's on Apple?
it's
Apple
on
TV?
Apple,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is crazy good. And like I confess, this is like my thing, right?
Yeah.
I love British
I know you
comedy,
do. Oh
and the
man.
weirder the better, right?
Right.
And all kinds of it too, right? Like any kind of spectrum, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like uh Absolutely Fabulous and Father
Right.
Ted
Oh
and,
yeah, yeah,
whatever it is,
yeah.
right? That's my bag. But this is like so good. And it's very actually like kind of throwbacky in a way too,
Mm,
because it feels like a show that it's funny now and it's good now and all that. But if somebody gave it to you and said, here's this other show from like the 80s or
right.
whatever, you
Yeah.
would believe that, right?
Right.
It's like,
Right.
it's very much like that. Anyway, so check out those two shows. Okay, Dune. And again, I'll start right out with my confession because I mean I'm like a
You're a
Dune.
huge Dune
I'm a
fan.
really, really huge nerd for
Yeah.
Dune, right? Like
Yeah.
I love Dune and
Have you read them all?
oh yeah,
Not that that's the benchmark for it. Like you could have just half read one and still
right.
been like, I'm in. But
No, yeah, I've read them
I
all.
mean, there's a lot of pages.
I, it has been a long time since I've read some of them, right?
Yeah.
Like a really long time.
Yeah.
Like all the later ones, like they're not as great. Like
Yeah.
they're not Dune.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
whatever. They serve their purpose. Speaking of which, I just have to throw out also that the director, Dennis Villanueva,
I tried
I
to
think.
catch up on this again. Again, listening to him and others like Roland and Timothy say it. Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, okay.
Just drop half of the letters and
I guess.
we'll do what we
Anyway,
do. Him.
but there was like a quote from him
Yes.
about working on Dune Messiah now,
Yeah.
and the quote was like that he didn't want to talk about it because there's not like a finalized script and we're still in like the
Right.
process and like
Sure. He's a pro.
I forget the exact thing that he said, but he said something basically to the effect of like, ideas are still forming and,
Yeah.
you know, the what we're gonna do with it, blah blah blah. Like he went on and on this whole thing, and that scared the crap out of me. Like,
Just shut up and tell me you're gonna make more of
it
these.
like made me really scared going
Yeah.
into watching this, right?
Right.
Because I'm like, if you're adapting
Yeah.
like the one of the world's most famous series of
Absolutely.
books,
Absolutely.
will we like not have like a lot of ideas formulating?
Right.
Like, can you just do the thing?
I mean, you have it plotted out from
Right.
A to Z.
Like,
You're just waiting for the check.
I don't need Foundation to ever
Yeah.
happen again.
Right.
I mean, the
Right. That
Foundation
was a big
show
disappointment.
is it's not even a disappointment. It was just like
Yeah.
sacrilege. It was
Yeah.
evil and horrible. It's like
I remember you telling me
there's
about it the
like
night you saw it.
there's like so little
Hell.
that has anything to do with the book
Yeah.
in the first place. I'm like, listen, dude.
Right. It's not that hard. It's already written out
Don't-
for you.
yeah,
Just follow
don't
this.
start coming up with ideas. Okay. Like,
I can't
here's
tell if,
how I can make it better.
and I can't tell if this Dennis, I mean, I'm going to say Dennis more than I'm going to say Denny. And I can't tell if Dennis is like in the school of like, is he just humble and genius? Is he not trying to jinx something? Is he playing like,
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't know,
know.
but it was a weird quote
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
It's just a weird take on trying to say you didn't want to say anything. Like, just say you don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Don't give me this whole thing about how you're like reworking.
We have things in the mix.
Shit
We've
or
got to feel like we have ideas. We're batting it around. We
yeah.
do it on
Anyway,
Tuesdays.
so all right, doing the part two, right?
Yep.
Um, and I don't feel like normally we would like run you through the plot, right? But that seems pointless.
Right.
But as everyone knows already, it's Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya. I do have to say, and I'll probably get to it at some point, but it's like Aaron Butler.
Yep.
He is flipping weird in this movie.
Why?
I mean, he's pretty weird anyway.
Yeah.
But he's supposed to, there are some things, and we talk a lot about acting and what happens and stuff. And we got to get our ratings out, so I don't want to go out for on forever. But
Right. I understand. That's
but
fine.
there sometimes people play the character of
Yeah.
like really weird people,
Yeah.
like really psycho people.
Right.
And you go, he's a little too good at that. Like
Yeah. I don't think that guy's acting very
like
much.
he's exactly
Like,
like
yeah.
he has to play like a nutty guy, right?
Yeah.
And there's however he's being directed and told to do this, or
Right.
however, they do a couple of takes and they go, sneer a little more, or whatever
Right.
the case may be. And like there's, what he's being directed to do, and then what he's doing with what he's being directed to do or
Yeah.
whatever. And he just seems like, I don't know, just be like a creepy psychopath and let's see what happens. And like
Right.
the whole movie was like one takes of
Right.
everything because they were like,
He's got that.
yeah, man,
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's weird, huh?
He's really, really weird. Anyway, so it's continuation of the movie, and like I said, we don't have to talk about it, and the trailers pretty much live up to expectations.
It's hard to believe if you're watching Dune 2, you haven't seen Dune yet. I mean,
Right,
I guess somebody could be dragged along, but you are likely
right.
to be believed that you've seen it. So,
Yeah. So, like I said, I have to just start out and say that I'm totally like a Dune nerd and
yeah.
everything, but I couldn't not give it a 10.
Yeah, wow. I had you at 9, 9.5, so I thought I was pretty close. I figured
Yeah,
there was
I've
something
thought
in
about
your
it for a while,
there must
and
have been something in there that
there
just drove you nuts, but I guess they nailed the
there
things.
are things in the movie that drove me nuts, and we'll talk about those. Although, I don't know, not really drove me nuts, but there were things where I was like,
This
yeah,
is how you're gonna do it? Yeah.
I don't know. But we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, my rating is a 10. Your rating is like 3.
So, I
That's my prediction.
in 3, 'cause that would be fun for me to just, step on all your stuff. I'm a huge Dennis fan, and all the stuff that Denis I'm gonna try to get better at that. All the stuff that he has done, even the stuff that didn't land right with me, like Blade Runner sort of comes to mind. I love his work. I love his style. I love his aesthetic and in a very strange way to talk about a movie that's 2 hours and 46, 47 minutes long. I love his pacing. Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't make short films. If it's The Arrival and I'm like, all right, we're in here for almost 3 hours or whatever he's up to. I'm just such a fan, and there are very few people who can make movies like he makes that keep me entertained for as long as the movie runs. Fincher's another guy. Um, I'm not the biggest Dune fan, and it never hit me the way that others did, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. Partially was I tried to dip my foot into that water before I was probably mature enough to really appreciate the hell out of it. This film's amazing. I loved it. I didn't love it enough to give it a 10, but I'm there at 9, and I feel like when I watch it again, if that comes around, I can't imagine watching it very soon, but watching it again may increase a bit more, but the stuff that's going on there for a film that long and that dense is both doing all the hard stuff easily. It's got so many things to tell, and at times it doesn't feel like it's telling anything. It's just showing you things. But in the hands of a good filmmaker, in the hands of a good story, the show Don't Tell is actually doing more than telling would anyway. Everything that I felt it was trying to convey and all the characters with their very different and sometimes aligned motivations were all running in all the right places. I think Chalamet's really effective here, but I don't really know Paul from the book well enough to know if he's hitting everybody's sweet spot for things. I do know I've taken a few liberties over the years with things that she's been in, but this is the best work that Zendaya has ever done. And I felt like for the first time getting her out of the Spider-Man franchise, like she's not just acting with her eyebrows, like she's actually
Right.
emoting, acting. She's got scenes where she's just talking to Paul in their intimate moments and public moments. I just feel what's happening between them, and I'm like, that's the sign that this is working. Roland's having a blast. can't remember the last time Javier Bardem looked like he was charming his way through everything.
Right.
Like it's just
Right.
everything that I loved about the film comes around full circle to say that when it's working, and it's working almost all the time, it's working on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Like it's just the visual aspect, the spectacle, feeling. It's funny when we were going to see the film before the film started, we were both talking about how much I love being in the theater, and you're like, eh, I can sort of take it. I don't need it. I appreciate it. And I'm like watching this film and I'm thinking, I got a pretty good TV at home. I can't always turn the sound up the way I want because my girlfriend texts me like, what the hell is happening? And in this film, sometimes it sounds like you're in the middle of a church bell, like
Right.
bass, big gongs, and then it doesn't leave for like, I don't know if that's my ears,
Right.
tinnitus. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I'm still vibrating from some of them. And yet I want to fire it up, especially for certain scenes. In my mind, you cannot have the volume loud enough for one of the scenes near the end when Paul is proving that he is the man. Like that is happening, the sound mixing alone, like give that dude the Oscar or
Yeah.
that woman the Oscar. Whoever did that alone, you could watch that on 10 or 11 all the time because it gives me goosebumps just to have it happen. I've gone over just my quick startup for it, but man, it really just is working everywhere.
Yeah, and it is definitely one if you're in the argument with anyone about seeing stuff in theaters, right?
This is one.
It is one really you want to see in a theater. And I, as you implied, and most of the time I'm
You're not
not.
anti-theater. That's it.
And
You're not against movie
you would
theaters, but
think, because movie critics are supposed to be the people going, everyone go to
save
the theater and
save the
see,
theater.
yeah, see everything in a theater. And you know,
Not all of them.
it's just I just don't
No, I know.
I don't need it. And it's for the right movie where it's like you need to have some serious sound,
That's it.
or you need,
Right.
there's stuff where it's like you want a big
Yeah.
like experience or stuff. But like 80% of movies or
They're not
something.
that. They're
Come
really not.
on.
I know.
Is it different? Did something happen that was different? I don't know. Anyway, um, yeah, so, kind of going off of what you said and getting more into the movie, there's another thing that he said recently, that he was
Um,
quoted in some interview
uh-oh.
where he said something about, and I'm not gonna like look it up and quote exactly what he said, but he said something about how he's not a fan of dialogue or whatever. Like he would
God, that's so
he would
weird.
rather make a movie
Yeah.
where there is no like
Right.
talking at all, and you just watch a movie,
I vaguely know
and
this
then
quote.
and then at the end of the movie you leave and you go like huzzah, or I don't
Right.
know
Yeah. No,
exactly what
no.
he said, but that
Yeah.
was basically, he was like, dialogue, whatever,
Yeah.
which is kind of like, just calling yourself stupid, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it's
People need
like
to talk.
ridiculous.
Give,
But
give me the talking.
but the problems that I do have with this movie, 'cause we can start there
Hit them. Yeah. Let me hear it.
because I loved the movie.
Right.
And the weird thing too is, and as I said, I'm a huge Dune fan, and
Right.
so obviously I'm, inclined to like it. Although, to be fair, I think that also makes me inclined to be pissed at it and
Sure.
think that it screwed shit up, and so it kind of
Yeah.
balances out,
Definitely.
really, whatever. Um, I'm maybe more forgiving if it's close, at least, or
Yeah.
whatever. But um the things that I thought were bad and strange anyway about the movie are like, one, I feel like has to do with his theory of not wanting dialogue, and he just
Yeah.
wants to show you a bunch of stuff, right? Because there was a bunch of stuff where, it was just, let me have you watch this for a while,
Yeah.
and then here's what that means. And you're like, "Wait, why does that mean that?"
Right.
Bec and
Yeah.
you're like, and which is really tied together the same, like, you can't exactly extricate these problems from each other. So one is that I don't feel he, like, gave you a lot for some things,
Yeah.
because he
Right.
just wanted to show how
Right.
cool everything was.
Right.
And I mean, he's right, he did it, right?
Yeah.
And it worked well enough, maybe, right? But it should have been better.
Could have been better.
There were scenes that should have been better,
Yeah.
and they weren't better because he didn't want to actually get you there.
Yeah.
He wants to prove to himself that he can just show the sand dune and
Yeah.
like show people talking to each other over there and like
Right.
you'll get it or
Yeah.
you know what like whatever the case may be. There's like a lot of examples in the movie, but that ties directly together with there are too many things in this movie for me where what we get in the story is really kind of like, ah, look, you read the book,
Yeah.
so you know,
Right.
right?
There's a feeling of that.
There are several things that happen in the movie where the movie does not actually earn what it wants in payoff
I agree.
because the trying to earn the payoff that it's doing
Yeah.
is just going, here's this, you read the book, you know, now here's the payoff, go.
Right.
And I'm like, dude,
Yeah. Right.
that
Missed.
that ain't how that works, right?
And for 3 hours, you can find some time.
And not only for 3 hours, but this is one book. This is a second movie. Like you've got
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
really long movies of one book,
Right.
and you can't fit in like stuff happening,
Right.
right? And so, not that you need specific examples of this necessarily, but one is kind of an overarching thing of both movies
Yeah.
where nobody even really like says like the spice must flow,
Right.
right? Like the book the movies all together, not even like this happens in one scene
Yeah.
or anything, but it's like the whole overarching thing is like spice is important.
Right. Take
Okay.
our word for it.
Okay, here's the movie,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And they don't really even get into like what is that? You just have to know from reading the
Right.
books. They don't have like this is like why spice is important.
Yeah.
They don't really tell you anything about the wars where we got rid of all
Right.
computers.
Right.
And,
Right.
in the first movie, they give you a mentat, they say he's a mentat, and then they go, and, whatever, now he's dead. I
Right.
don't know. There's like a thing.
Well, look over here.
But they don't,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they don't really like do what does that mean or what's
Yeah.
happening, right? And then, they have like computer screens.
Right.
And I'm like, dude,
A little more justification. It's
but
almost like, oh, go ahead.
but anyway, I mean, there's several of those,
Yeah.
right? And especially when we get to the end and, he doesn't even get to have his, he who can destroy a thing
Right.
controls the thing. He
Right.
didn't even get that line. He just goes, tell him we'll fire the atomics into the spice fields, which doesn't even make any sense because that's not how that works.
Right.
And never in the movies does it even actually say that spice comes from the worms.
Right.
They just the spice fields. What do you mean the spice fields? We have to go find the spice fields like every day because we don't know where they're
We know where
moving.
they are.
What are you talking about?
There's definitely an aspect here that your older brother or your dad or your uncle told you about Dune
Right.
before
right.
you opened up the pages and was like, so here it is. There's no technology. They don't trust it. They tried it. AI sucked. They need the stuff from the worms. The worms are bad. They're good. This is the desert plant. That's the primer you need. And it's funny thinking back and looking back over Denny's films, like the one film that seems to have been mostly split between these long, beautiful, amazing visual shots with really not being much said for me is Sicario. And I'm not trying to jump out of Dune for a second, but there's a lot of talking in there. There's a lot of times where no one says anything and you're just driving and you're
Right.
shooting and you're watching violence and you're just trying to figure out the visuals of everything. I genuinely thought as well, there were times where I thought there just needs to be not more dialogue like because there's fun. So for example, there's a fun moment where Paul walks over to the group and everyone's sort of laughing. And it's sort of like a high school moment where they're just like, so
Right.
what are you guys laughing at? And they're like, yeah, nothing, savior. And it's
Right.
like that's such a I don't know if that's in the book or not. There's just such a throwaway, it feels like added on. There's such a throwaway sort of like we should have something here. Like there should be something. There should be some talking instead of everyone crouching and holding sand and looking at the sunset
Right.
and,
Right.
riding a worm or whatever. There needed to be more of that to make it more bonding. Because if it isn't there for people who haven't read the stories the way I haven't, there has to be something in the film because people respond to dialogue more than they do anything. That's why they quote movie lines to each other.
Right.
So give people things to say, So
Yeah. Anyway, so that was really like a lot of my problem with it. And then the ending I didn't really like, right? Um to it to a degree in certain parts of it. Because what it felt like was you read Dune, right?
yeah,
And by the time you get to the end, uh, and we have like giant battle
right.
in the book, it's kind of like, and it ended up being pretty easy, right? And so what he decided to film was, it ended up being pretty easy.
Right.
I'm like, oh, come
We
on.
had a real cool
Well,
plan. We're gonna cut them in the middle, come around this way, and I'm
right.
gonna come that
And then
way.
you
They're gonna
hardly,
be dumb.
and then like you hardly see anything of it. The movie just kind of goes, look, man, like it might have as well have just been like 15-second montage scene
Right.
of like, well, they're all
Can
dead.
you imagine a sports
And I'm
play
like,
where they just draw it up on the clipboard and then they just cut to them going to the shower and be like, got that.
right.
We nailed that
That worked.
touchdown.
Right.
Good play, man.
So I was like kind of disappointing. But then the other thing about the ending that was kind of disappointing for me was the whole knife battle.
It's
And
better in the book.
and how it just like how it came to be, right?
Okay.
Like, so we get him in the room and then we go, "Ah, all right, let's have a duel
Yeah.
because that's what we do or whatever." And there's no like, um, not that it's even necessarily in the book or whatever, but in like the earlier David Lynch movie,
Yeah.
when Sting has like his
Yeah.
whole like
Man.
thing,
That's
right?
wild. Yeah.
And they made Sting like a different character,
Yeah.
right? Like Sting was really a bit more into showing off how much ego he had.
Right.
And we've gone like a different way with the character in this movie,
Yeah.
which is fine. But when we get to that in this movie, he just sort of stands there and looks at you because we don't
Right.
want any dialogue, right?
Right.
Like he just
Right.
like looks menacingly across the room. It's like, I don't
Right.
know. And then the end of the movie just felt like so weirdly, I think, out of touch with the point of the book when the movie ends and they're like, tell them that we'll destroy the spice fields, and then you get to the end and it's like, spoiler alert, I guess. Like at the end well, their response is
Right.
no,
Right.
right?
We
And you're
deny
like,
you.
no,
Yeah. Right.
like
Did you tell
that's
him I have the spice?
that's like, yeah, that's like negating the
Yeah. Right.
whole
The whole
like
the whole
point of
excuse
being
me.
in
Yeah.
control of the spice is like
Right.
everybody goes that we do not
Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
We deny your ascension,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's
you're
like,
like, but I've got all the water, man.
but that's not
Yeah.
how that works. I don't know. It was it just seemed like, we had to watch all this stuff happen
Yeah.
forever, right? And meanwhile, I'm still giving the movie a 10, which is for those of you who only know us from YouTube, that's how we roll here.
Right.
We
Yeah.
rate things really highly and then only tell you about
We'll
what's bad
cut
about
it
it.
up a bit. Well, it's
But
okay.
we just went through having to watch like Ride a
How
Worm
long?
for
Yeah.
like 15 minute
Let's see.
straight scene of Ride the Worm.
Right.
And we get to the end where really like all of this stuff is supposed to happen. And
Yeah.
it's all, supposed to come together. Um, and that ends up with he says silence at the Reverend Mother
Yeah.
who says abomination, and
Right.
that's all you need to know about that happening. Like
Yeah.
that's like just like we got to like the last 15 minutes that we're gonna film, and it was like, get it all in,
Right.
go. Like
Go.
everything has to happen in like
Right.
1 second, and it's like, come on. You know how long you made me watch this movie? Because, like I said, you have to a certain extent, put this together as one thing. It's
Yeah.
one book, it's
Yep.
one story.
Right.
now I've been watching this for like 7 hours or whatever the hell it is, right?
Close. Yeah.
And then all of that is going to come down to we are going to cram
Chop, chop, chop. Yeah.
everything in so fast at the
You
end.
know,
And I was like, oh,
I don't know what it's
man.
like in the book. As a strange fun compliment to the films too. Even now, knowing I've heard that there are some things that he's changed, maybe had a little loose change, maybe big changes. Makes me want to read the book again.
Yeah.
I read it and remembered parts of it, but I don't remember it the way I should a book that I loved. So that's a good sign. For whatever it's worth, I totally understand what you're saying, and I felt that way with other films, and I can see it in this film. Man, I love that scene. That quick
Oh,
scenes when he just says silence
right, right.
and knocks her down, and everybody's just sort of like, damn, dude, like, all right, like you're the man now, right? Like, oh, I loved it. Just paid off perfectly.
That's one of the other things that kind of leads into one of the other things that I don't like about both movies is there are some things where we just don't pay a lot of attention to it
Yeah.
because again, it's like you read the book,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the Bene Gesserit thing, and basically if you watch this movie, all it comes down to really is that like they're scheming people and they can
Yeah.
use the voice.
Right.
And that's all there is.
Right.
And that is not all there is.
Right, because the way
Like
this is actually one of the small problems I had too, which is you see the voice being used. No, it's interestingly used in the beginning of the first film where his mother's like, "Make me give you the water," and he's like, "No, come on, just give me the water," and she's like, "Make me." Later, when they start using it a bit more, I'm like, "Why aren't you just walking around voicing everybody to do
right,
whatever the
right,
hell you want, anytime you want? Like, why the intrigue and the subterfuge and the duality?" Bullshit. Give me the voice and just watch how people use it.
right.
Like, I'll take things over quick. So,
Yeah, it was a little weird. Anyway, so enough of bagging on it, right? I thought in the first movie, I thought Timothy Chalamet was good enough.
yeah,
And I thought there were times when he was even like pretty good, right? In this movie, I thought he was great.
he's stunning. He's really working in a way it felt like they had reserved him or had him in reserve somewhat instead of him playing it that way.
Right,
Like it really seemed like he's like, look, filming these, you're gonna be killing it in the next one, but just pull it back a little bit more and be a little bit less of everything. And I was sort of wondering if he just didn't get it or
right,
because it's weird to think that maybe he was told that, but now I see, get more confident, get more vision, get more power. Now you're sort of becoming the person that you're afraid you're going to be.
right.
Like that
And I
works.
think for like purists of the book, like you said, I don't know if everyone will go, that's exactly how I think he should be,
Right.
right? But whether that's exactly the character as it should be laid out to you in the movie or whatever, he is being this character
Yeah.
like crazy well.
Oh, that's good.
He's really good. He's really good at being whoever he's supposed to be in this movie.
Yeah.
Is everyone going to agree that that's who he should be because of the book? I don't know.
Right.
And Zendaya is great. Everybody is like really great. And
Man,
Javier Bardem
dude.
is there were a couple of times where I was like, now is that in the script?
Right. Or did he just pull
Did
that?
he just go, I'm going to do this time,
I
and they went with it because he the thing that I like about his character, and even I will admit, like, is that exactly how Stilgar is supposed to be?
right.
I have no idea.
Yeah, who
I
cares?
don't
Who cares
remember.
anymore?
I don't remember if
Let
that's
Javier
exactly what
go.
that character is, right? Um, but he is such a great character.
Yeah, he is a really interesting character.
I mean, he's got like a lot of sides to him,
Yep.
and he's very real, and he's
Yeah.
very believably, the guy who has this existence
Yeah.
on
Who's lived
on
this
this
life on this
planet.
planet
Right,
and
right,
believes what he believes is this guy.
right,
And we should all be so lucky to have a Stilgar in our life propping us up, standing behind us, being like, "You can do this,"
right.
tell us the way. It's funny also, just again, not coming from the books wholly, but watching other pop culture things. I mean, now that I've seen Denny's version of this, it's hard to not see how the Wachowskis took a bunch for Morpheus, for Trinity. Like, there's a whole thing here where Stilgar's basically like, he's the prophet,
Right.
and I believe it. And everyone's like, again, he's like, maybe I did before, but I believe it this time. I've seen things. He can do things. When he does this, it's because he'll believe. And I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, you guys just riffed Frank's books left and right for all
Right.
kinds of fun ideas, but he's not doing any version of Larry Fishburne. He's actually just being like, if I'm this guy on this planet, like you just said, this is how I'm going to be. And he steals every scene he's in with other scene stealers like Josh Brolin and Charlamagne, like everybody that's in there. And I'm like, and then you start dropping. I know I'm throwing like a scattershot thing because we're running a little bit out of time, but you start dropping people's performances in all the way. Florence Pugh's just dropping in now, and you just got
Right.
all these other A-listers who are just appearing in these films. That's a blast.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun. But he specifically, whenever he was on screen watching him, I thought in the first film, I'm backing up a bit. In the first film, I thought, without knowing exactly how the story was going to get cut up, I'm like, well, Momoa's character is really fun, and he's got the charm oozing everywhere. He could steal every scene he's in, and he
Right.
does really well. The moment Javier shows up, it's like, well, this is my scene.
Right.
This is my movie now.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And a lot of the other positive things that I would say about this movie are really you could apply to either one, right?
Yeah,
Like you mentioned, the pacing. The pacing is outrageously strong in
it's
this
so good.
movie. It bounces around through different things. There's lots of parts where we're just talking and
Yeah,
we have to say all the right notes because there are fans, and so you have to do
right.
this. Then we've got like the battle scenes, and then we've got to, take down the spice vehicles, and we've got to fight all these people and do all
Yeah,
and we've got to stare out over the
right.
dunes for
All the
like two
time.
or three minutes at a
Yeah,
time. Um, but it's so well put together
yeah,
that you're even though sometimes this movie feels like you're doing the same thing for a long time,
yeah.
which would be like a killer in other movies,
Lesser films.
but you don't ever feel like you're just doing the same thing for a long time and
Right.
we're dragging anything out for any reason, right?
Yeah,
There's always actually something else that we're doing for a
right.
reason, right?
Yeah, if he had, and he doesn't, but going back to the less dialogue in scenes, if in his head he sort of has like a thing in his mental storyboards where he's like, there can only be 5 sentences per page.
Right.
He absolutely has on the flip side of that, there has to be X amount of exposition or narrative visual stuff before we move to something else because I don't want to lose you. I don't want to bore you.
Right,
And
right.
he's got it. I
Yeah.
mean, he's nailed it. Whether he was building up to it all along, I've never felt his pacing was bad in any of his films. That's one thing that he excels at.
Yeah. And as far as other things, like I said, they could apply to the first movie. It's
Yeah.
freakishly gorgeous looking.
Oh, so it's a spectacle of watching
Everything
movies.
is everything is fantastic. The only thing that I don't love for some reason, just because it feels weird,
What's that?
is the fact that like all the Conan people look like aliens
Like,
and nobody else does
I
anymore,
know. I
right?
know. Yeah.
They all have like, different like shaped heads
Yeah.
kind of, and they look alien,
Yeah.
whatever. And nobody else in the movie
Has that at all.
does. There's everybody else is exactly the
Individuals.
same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that seems
Yeah.
odd. And I don't know that I don't recall that having anything to do with the book. So if it does, then I'm wrong, and that's
Yeah,
how
who
it should
knows?
be, I guess. But it felt weird to throw that in when I don't think it's in the book
Yeah. Right.
anyway.
You like the
Um,
worms?
but the worms are pretty good.
They're great.
Yeah, the worms are I don't know. They only show up so much.
The less is more with the worms for
I
sure.
thought honestly, I like the David Lynch version of his having to do the ride thing,
Right.
even though the special
The
effects are
technology is absolutely
goofball, right?
limited. I know. I know.
But
Yeah.
it was a little something in this movie. It was a little bit
Yeah.
too for no reason.
Yeah.
But and like I said, that scene kind of went on longer than it needed to. But in a
A
movie
little
where everything else is
is
really,
going
it
that
was
way.
just a little, it
Yeah.
wasn't like it was, like 5 extra minutes to
Right.
it or
Right.
anything,
No, it doesn't have to be that long.
but everything looks just amazing.
Yeah.
It's put together, like, so well where, there are a lot of parts in this movie, just because of how the book is, where, you can really just, like, go off the rails.
Right.
And it's not as bad, even though there are, like I said, parts where it
Excuse
just it just uses the crutch of just saying, "Well, I don't care, you have to have read the book."
me.
Where,
Right.
the
Yeah.
David Lynch movie, like, he just said that.
Right. Like, I'm
I mean, he
doing
just
this
straight up
because
said, "If you haven't read the book, don't even show up because I'm
right.
not gonna explain anything."
Sometimes they're there. Sometimes the
And,
films are really just adaptations, so,
and it and it
uh,
still worked. This one
mhm,
doesn't have that extreme of a problem, but,
no.
um there was so much of it that was just amazing to watch.
Yeah.
And there was so much of it, the thing that I thought was great is, every, like, cheesy Western that's trying to be cool and win an award,
Yeah.
has the scenes where we look out over the
Oh,
prairie and shit,
sure.
and it's like, "Look,
Tumbleweed moves and
it
dog barks
I
and
can make stuff look pretty,"
yeah.
right? And this movie is like nothing but a bunch of, "I can make stuff look pretty," but the thing that's different in this movie is that all of the pretty is just accidentally there while we're doing stuff.
Right. That's I was
N
yeah.
Not like we're just staring at it because
Yeah.
this is our, special effects budget, and we can
I
have
guess
CGI millions of people,
yeah.
whatever.
I'll say this on the way out because we're trying to cut it shorter. I guess I'll say that right now, especially with Dune back to back, 1 and 2, man, between him and George Miller and the universe that Miller makes for the Mad Max films, there's an aesthetic happening in their films that I'm intoxicated with. Like, I just look at it and be like,
Right.
"Man, just pause the film. I just wanna look at that for a little bit."
Yeah.
And that's costume, location, everything is set up, just it's awesome. Nailing it.
I feel like there is, in this movie especially, but also recently at large, right?
Yeah,
There is kind of a movement away from, like, what's really great about making a movie look awesome is that it looks, like, more real,
yeah.
And this is like, it looks less real,
It looks otherworldly.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I agree. I
and
agree.
it's gorgeous and fantastic, but that also, just the action scenes are really great
Yeah,
because we gotta go, but I wanna throw out a few more things, like, action scenes really are good,
yeah,
and action scenes are not necessarily my bag, right? Like,
right.
if they're good, and that's great, and it works in the movie, then
Yeah,
that's awesome. But, I don't wanna see, like, people have a fight, and it
just
lasts for,
because.
like, 10
Yeah,
minutes,
right.
and, we get hit with frying pans, and we
Oh, yeah.
bounce back up,
No one ever is
and then when
injured.
it works for the plot, somebody
Right.
will go like this, and you'll fall down and
Yeah,
everything.
right.
Anyway, but the action scenes are really good, the fighting is really good. I think it's could have been hit harder, uh, just how badass the Fremen are
Yeah,
compared to everyone else. Because
right.
we don't really, like, hit on that.
No, you don't
Uh,
get a sense that they're vicious and skilled and lethal. Like,
yeah,
you're just like,
we
"There's a
don't
lot of them."
we don't get any real explanation that, the Sardaukar are the baddest ass fighters in the world because they
Right.
live on this prison planet, and
Yeah,
that's all they do is fight for their whole lives and everything. And the Fremen basically, like, wipe the floor with them.
right.
Like, we don't really get that that's
No,
what
not at
happens,
all.
except that we see them win the
Do it.
fights
Yeah,
or
okay.
whatever. But
Yeah,
anyway, there is, like, a lot
yeah.
left out in that way, but it's just really
What
fantastic
a great
movie.
effort.
And, maybe I'm just fanboying
Yeah,
it because I love Dune, but
I'm
it's a amazing movie.
well, and then on that aspect, I'm fanning because I love Benny and his films. Like, I'm so psyched he's having fun with it, and all accounts are sort of pointing towards the box office success and greenlighting of I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be Messiah, but let's just throw the 3rd one out there.
Yeah,
Let's go,
yeah.
you know? I'm up
So
for it.
allegedly he's working on Messiah. The really tricky part there, and no super Dune fans write into me or whatever.
Get him.
Uh,
Go for him. This is
but
it.
the problem with going into the sequels is, you've got like Dune Messiah and Children of Dune and
Yeah.
whatever. The books really get kind of boring
Yeah.
from like the perspective of what do we film? What do
Right.
we like watch
Yeah.
happen, right? Now they have their moments and some
Sure.
of them are better than others, but they are really like, you know, now it's like Downton Abbey or something.
Oh
I mean,
man.
it's all like political
This guy. Get
intrigue
him.
and,
Send him.
whatever. It's not like
Yeah.
a ton of like
Right.
action that you can film or whatever. And they're different things are happening,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, we won.
Right.
And now
And now there are different
we're just
motivations
like kind
and
of going
things.
through the
Right.
aftermath and stuff and
Yeah.
whatever. Anyway, there will be very different films, and
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see what happens
Yeah.
with that anyway. All right, thanks for tuning in. Please hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you next week with the worst of the year list
Oh yeah.
because we'll go back
We'll do that.
to
All right.
that'll
I
be
love
fun.
it.
And although what we will probably do is because the worst of the year goes fast
It goes quicker.
because we don't care about
We
talking
just
about the
talked quick.
movies, right?
Yeah. I hated it. 6.
We will probably have a couple of movies, including if you want something to look forward to. I think probably that Adam Sandler movie,
Yep.
and there is a new Millie Bobby Brown
Yep.
movie, which damned if I can remember
I
the
can't
name
remember.
of
I
it
can see
right
the
off the top
poster
of
in
my
my
head,
head
but it like just came out today,
today.
I think,
Yeah.
as we're filming. So we'll probably like throw in at least those two real quick
Yeah.
and then do the worst of the year.
All right.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. And thanks.
Bye.